Today on Across the Fence, we're going to the tropics, right here in Burlington, Vermont. Hi, I'm Leonard Perry with the University of Vermont. I'm here at the UVM Greenhouses, where we'll take a look at this high-tech facility today. We'll see some pretty cool and interesting indoor plants, and we'll take a look at some of the research they're doing here that's actually helping Vermont farmers. With us to give us this tour is the greenhouse manager, Colleen Armstrong. Thanks so much, Colleen, for spending some time with us today.
Welcome back. I'm glad you're here.
Well, tell us, why does UVM have a greenhouse?
Well, we're in a fairly cold environment, and in order to teach and conduct research, because we have such a short season in Vermont, having a glasshouse structure really helps faculty both for their research projects where they need an extended period of growing time, but also for a lot of different classes that use the greenhouse. Plant biology might look at introduction for botany for students, or the green world, or it might become more developed in terms of looking at ecology and morphology of plants, plant systematics, applied horticultural courses such as an introduction to home and garden horticulture, commercial plant propagation, and then different types of agroecology, soil chemistry. All of them will take advantage of having a space that has a lot of environmental controls and be able to supplement light if it needs to be a long day instead of a short winter day. So there's a lot of advantages of having a controlled environment to be able to offer a consistent environment for research, and then also a facility for faculty to be able to teach.
Well, of course, with all these, what a lot of people think of as houseplants, I know my students in the indoor plants course also use this a lot of times, and I've been interested too, not just plant students, but art students I've seen in here drawing.
That's right. Jane Neroni teaches botanical illustrations, and it's offered both through plant soil science and the art department. This class is spring and fall. It's filled every semester, and students are thinking they'll come in and draw in the classroom, but they'll also spend a lot of time in the greenhouse on their own and with Jane. And I'm actually going to take the class next fall.
Wow, that's
and
great.
I'm not an artist.
Well, that'll be good. You can draw some of the plants that you have here, to tell people about. Yeah, no, it's just so many students, even if they're just on campus, faculty, even the public can come in, and
that's right.
Just, any time of the year. I know you have things going on. Tell us some of the things during the year.
Well, the greenhouse is open to the public Monday through Friday from 8:30 to 4:30, and people will come in individually. Sometimes school groups will come in, or other educational groups like OLLI, and they'll use the facility too. In the spring, we have a plant sale that is pretty popular. It's really the UVM community that comes and visits us most and buys some plants, but sometimes the word spreads out a little bit further than the UVM community. We have a lot of summer programs in terms of undergraduate students taking advantage of the greenhouse during the summer to conduct some of their research, and then we swing back around to the fall. And the first year students come in and they receive a coffee plant that's grown by the horticulture club, and the whole cycle beautifully repeats itself.
Well, that's great. Well, one of the things I mentioned at the outset, this is a high-tech facility, and you alluded to some of the things. Could you give us a little sampling of some of the technology that's used here?
Often greenhouses are now referred to as controlled environments, small or large, and the technology that we use is using sensors that are linked into a computer, and then all of the equipment that is used is also tied into the computer for control, and also to be able to display your data in terms of what has happened in the greenhouse. So we use the sensors, such as the one near you. It will also open and close the covers in the greenhouse for shading and also for thermal coverage. We will use it for a tremendous number of pieces of equipment for cooling, believe it or not, in northern Vermont. internal air circulation. We use it for pest control in terms of being able to exhaust air when the least number of people are on campus after we've sprayed. So there's a lot of different uses for it, but probably the best with this new system that we've put in called Argus is there's a tremendous number of efficiencies so that you are using the equipment and not wasting energy in terms of having a fan exhausting air and at the same time having heat on in your greenhouse, which with independent thermostats can happen.
Well, that's great. So
we're
it's
trying
really
to
made some steps towards sustainability then with a
Yes.
new system. You mentioned the pest control. I know that's a big issue here, as people that have houseplants know. You get a few pests. Well, you've got so many different plants.
We do.
And how do you kind of get a handle and keep those not only under control, but in a public space too?
Right. So because it's a public space, we really minimize the amount of pesticides that we use. And to be able to do that, integrated pest management uses several different strategies. Our kind of base is using natural enemies. So we will purchase from commercial insectaries parasites or parasitoids, predaceous mites, nematodes, beetles, and they often will have a specific relationship with the pests in the greenhouse. We have about 8 common pests. The ones that I think most gardeners will recognize: aphids, thrips, two-spotted mites, fungus gnats, and because it's a conservatory, we have mealybug and scale. Both of those you might see on outdoor shrubs, but for us it's a continual
I
project.
actually see some of those at home too. So
Yes, that's right.
have to get out
Unfortunately,
the
we do.
soap and water and work at them, but
That's right.
you have too many plants for that. So it's interesting. You have these pests, the good pests that actually go after the bad pests.
That's right. So we have insects and little mites that will release, and they will feed on different stages or maybe multiple stages of a pest. Aphids is a great example. We will release a parasitic wasp that will lay its egg in the aphid. We might use green lacewing that would feed on them directly. In a greenhouse with a soil base, we could use a little fly called Aphidoletes ephidemyza. So lots of different selections that you can make that's going to work with the particular area. The conservatories are unique. It's almost like an indoor agricultural ecology. Research and teaching is different. It's a little bit more monoculture. Your threshold for damage might be lower, so that you use those factors in terms of the decisions you make, whether to purchase the biological control, or maybe it's a cultural technique by selecting a disease-resistant variety. Or you may choose, because you need to apply a safe biorational pesticide that will be compatible with the natural enemies that you have in that particular
Yeah, I know a lot
greenhouse.
of greenhouses are starting to go more and more toward this same approach, which is great.
They really are. I would say the largest greenhouse in Vermont is very, very well indoctrinated in using integrated pest management and using a lot of natural enemies.
So bottom line is, if people are walking through here and they see some insects, they actually may be good insects, a good chance of that.
Absolutely, yeah, because our larger ones that you can see actually are beneficial insects.
Well, we talked about, you mentioned, we've got so many plants here and there's some pretty cool plants, and I know you've got some what are called economic plants, those that are used for crops. You mentioned the coffee earlier.
Yes.
I noticed a beautiful coffee plant here with actual seeds on it. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's interesting. Vermont has so much going on with coffee in terms of different, producers and roasters and businesses. Who would have thought? And Mark Starrett and the Horticulture Club, they grow coffee seedlings for the incoming freshman class. The coffee plant is an understory plant in a subtropical or tropical environment, and it actually does fairly well in a northern greenhouse so long as it's warm enough. And
so it gets part shade, but as long as it gets the warmth.
So long as it gets the warmth. And people might buy a coffee plant from us and take it into their office and be able to nurture it along, which is really amazing. But we grow our coffee trees, harvest the cherries. We will dry them. Yep, we will roast them, and we don't have a lot of the cherries. Like we might get a couple hundred, but we're able to make like 1 cup of coffee.
There we go. Well, another economic plant I saw in there was the pineapple too, which people may not have seen how that actually grows.
Yeah. That's another fun experiment that you can try at home. If you buy a pineapple and you cut the top of it off, but you still have a little bit of flesh, you know, below the green growth, you can let it dry out and then put it in some sandy soil, and it could develop roots, and then you might actually start seeing new leaves on that pineapple. Put it outdoors during the summertime, and you might see a fruit developing from the center of the pineapple, which is actually a flower inflorescence with multiple flowers on the pineapple, which then those seeds develop, and the sweetness around it, you know, is part of the germ for the pineapple.
Well, there's so many other plants we just don't have time for, but one that caught my eye was the blue ginger, which is just gorgeous and unusual tropical. But there's another one that's been my favorite for years. I had them in college. It's an orchid. It's a terrestrial orchid, the ludizia. Tell us about that, the jewel orchid.
The jewel orchid is another one that you might find in a garden center. It's not as popular as like the phalaenopsis and the moth orchids, but it is easy to grow. And as you said, unlike the epiphytic ones, it grows in soil, it's low growing, it does need an indirect light or partial light, and with enough light and just a little bit of fertilizer in the warmer months, you often see a beautiful stalk with delicate white flowers on it. And
and this one you have is just loaded with flowers. Of course, it's got a great environment too, but
it does.
But
you can do it at home.
Just hear about a couple quickly research projects you've got here. I noticed there's one looks like wheat and looking at disease. I understand on that.
Right. This is one of the organic agriculture research projects. It is wheat that is being grown from seed that has a disease called smut on it, and we hear about smut with corn. It's actually can be a food
Looks
delicacy.
just like the name says, smut,
it does.
black
It's
disease.
It's black. It's a fungal pathogen, black spores, but it can easily infect wheat, and it will go into the seed embryo. And if organic growers are saving their seed from the previous season, it may be infected with that smut. Heather Darby and Ann Hazelrig are growing wheat that has been infected. They're looking at a way of being able to detect that disease in the seed so that farmers know not to plant it.
I know another project that caught my eye was looking at overgrazing, and it's really cool to see the roots there.
Wasn't it?
And I guess you have three there. The normal in the middle is been overgrazed, kind of like someone if they were mowing their lawn regularly.
Very much so.
And then on the right, just less grazing.
That's right.
Like if you were mowing your lawn higher. So I think the message not only to farmers on their fields, but also I always tell people mow the grass higher, and there's a good example. You see much better root growth on that hasn't been mowed as often or as low.
It's really dramatic because we see the root development, and it's so shallow with the overgrazed or overcut pasture compared to one that's been allowed to grow for about 6 weeks before it is grazed or cut. And not that we could leave our lawn for 6 weeks that long, but it really does demonstrate that if you just raise it up and let that grass be a little bit taller, you're going to have a healthier soil ecosystem below it, which we want.
How do people find, there's just so much more here at the greenhouse, how do people find out more about this?
If you go to UVM's website, under search, it's an alphabetical order, and G for greenhouse, and you'll see greenhouse facilities. Our website is pretty up to date.
That's good. UVM.edu, search for G for greenhouse.
Greenhouse, that's it.
That works.
That's true. And we are on Facebook, and we do have an Instagram.
Super. So if people do that, they can find you there too.
They can.
Well, thank you so much, Colleen, for your time today and giving us a great overview of this super facility.
Thanks for coming.
And thank you for watching our show today. For the University of Vermont, I'm Leonard Perry.